One of the highlights of our week away in Scotland for the retreat each year is, well, for me anyway, it's the darkroom. I love the whole week, but I absolutely adore the darkroom part of the week. We all go out together on the Monday for a walk in nature. We get to know each other, make some pictures together, just have a conversation about each other's photography. And we take along, if we've got our own film cameras, we take those along. Otherwise, we take one that Matt Sillers, the wonderful Matt Sillers from the Inverness Darkroom, we take one that he's loaned us. And then on the Tuesday, under the expert tutelage of Matt, we process those rolls of film and then set about making our own art prints to remind us of our time in the Highlands. Whether you've worked in the darkroom before or not, it's something that by the end of the day we can all do as a group to some degree of advanced knowledge. Sort of, he says, looking at himself. It's a day, though, of much wonderment. It really is. I mean, who can ever tire of watching a print come alive in a tray of developer? Oh, I love that moment. I really do. It's also at times the theatre of uncontrolled giggles, as someone, usually me, manages to drop something important on the floor just at the moment the lights go off and I'm trying to wind my film in the dark onto a spool to go in the developing tank. Oh, I've dropped it again. Where did it go? I always close the day with an increased admiration for those who can navigate a darkroom with creative finesse and expertise. And so I was delighted when one of our extra milers, who also happens to be a professional master printer, invited me to his darkroom in London. I say invited after much prompting from me. So thank you, Mike Crawford. I'm not sure you had a lot of choice. I was close to just camping outside your front door, to be honest. But Mike's a very special person for many reasons. And this episode is a special in itself too, because I'm inviting you to spend some quiet time in the darkroom with Mike and I. Mike is a London-based photographer, an expert printer, and he's run Lighthouse Darkroom it's just shy of 30 years. If I'd have gone to see him next year, we'd have been doing the 3-decade celebration episode. There's an idea. He's been trusted by some of the biggest name photographers to print their work, including the likes of Martin Parr, and a special book project for the late Elliott Erwitt. He knows, as my grandma would say, he knows his onions. I never knew what that meant, but it was something she said a lot. But like many of us, Mike has found that personal projects are also an important part of the whole creative process. So we do talk today about that as well. So it's making photographs as well as making prints. Now, do go and look at the show page, because he'll be describing pictures and talking about people that will be shown and linked to on that all-important show page on photowalk.show, episode number 444. Mike has lectured at various universities. He's led many darkroom workshops internationally, and he's written 4 books on the subject of printing. Plus, he's contributed over 70 articles to magazines like the British Journal of Photography and Black and White Photography, and that list is just growing. My grandma would usually now say again, oh, he knows his onions. It was one of her favourite phrases, yes, and something you'd hear at least half a dozen times when you're talking about somebody. But Mike's also been an absolute star when it comes to our own community as well. Those of you who've been walking with me for a good few years now on this show will know the name Hannah Gimblett, whose personal health struggles have prevented her from getting out to do what she loves. One of those things being photography. In fact, over the last few years, unfortunately, Hannah's become bedbound. But despite the difficulty and the pain, it hasn't stopped her creativity. And she's made a series of nature still life pictures, the latest collections being made with her beloved film cameras. Hannah's been exhibiting her work, despite the fact she never gets to see these in person, hanging on a local gallery wall close to where she lives. And Mike immediately answered my call for help when it came to printing Hannah's work a long time ago, and has been printing for her ever since to make Hannah's photographic dreams come to life. That's just another one of the reasons I think Mike is so very special. He's very, very generous with his time, with his expertise. So today, you and I, we go to Mike's place and chat with him about the craft that is specialist photographic printing. There aren't as many Mikes as there once were out there, that's for sure. What do you think, Gran? Yeah? He knows his onions. You're absolutely right.
Today on the Photo Walk.
I'd worked for advertising clients, advertising photographers, editorial photographers, fashion photographers. One by one, it changed. The first to go was advertising.
What's an adult poncho doing in here? Waterproof, hooded, lightweight, reusable poncho.
Shall we move on?
Dear Mike, am I allowed to read this?
Go on.
You are so important to me. Lots of love. Brian Griffin.
So yeah, I think photography is it's given me so much knowledge and so much chance to learn and see things and meet people.
That's Mike Crawford, my special guest today as we travel to his darkroom in North London, pore over his incredible work, drink all his coffee and finish off the chocolate hobnobs. Welcome along as we make our photo walk together, a show where we walk and make pictures photographically, sketchbooking our time together each week. Before we start, I want to thank those who support this show, our fabulous patrons and MPB, the largest global platform to buy, sell and trade in used photo and video gear, committed to making gear more accessible and more affordable. They're a service I completely trust for my own photographic needs, and there's many reasons for that, including their first-class customer service. Customers, like you, like me, can receive support through their help centre or by speaking with an expert over the phone or via live chat. I usually choose, when I've needed to speak with somebody. If I don't quite understand the technical nature of something I'm interested in buying, and you know me, tech can give me a nosebleed, you need somebody who's patient. And so far, that's always been the case. For those who live in the UK, you'll know that being rated excellent on Trustpilot with more than 30,000 reviews is a very good thing. And if there was a rating for truly very patient, they'd get that from me too. MPB is the largest global platform to buy, sell and trade used photo and video kit. The simple, safe and circular way to trade, upgrade and get paid for kit. Go to mpb.com. I will leave a link on the show page today. So even though we're not walking a path today, I know that many of you will still be taking a walk and making pictures as you listen to this conversation. One important side note, I'll be returning as Studio Neil here and there, including to set you a new assignment for the month, which this month, August, will be set by social and street photographer and Fujifilm ambassador Emily Renier. So, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. SD cards or a spare roll of film, very important for today, check. Let's walk. Mike Crawford, Lighthouse Darkroom. Let's start by opening the door. Lead away.
And welcome.
There we go. Welcome. Yes. Look at this. As a workspace, Mike, as I walk in here, the first thing that I think is there's a lot of stuff.
Needs a bit of a tidy.
No, don't even walk in yet. We haven't even started with this side. I know you're leading me away from the coffee station and the print station. It doesn't need a lot of tidying. I think probably everything here, you know what it does, where it's been, the history of it.
Yes, I just wish I could have a bit of time to sort of make it a bit tidier for you.
Right. Where do we start? So, first up, Mike, and we will talk about your history, but the history of why you're here, because this particular building, you've only been in for 3 or 4 years now, haven't you?
Yes, I've been working in London since '84, and I was working away during COVID, and the landlords decided to put the rent up by 93%.
So a small amount then?
Yes, so and this, as I say, was the time when we were still very aware everyone was masked up.
Yeah.
So I had to find somewhere pretty quick to move, and this is in North London. near Finsbury Park. Luckily, a client had sort of suggested I got in touch with her landlord. And while a popular building, I think there's maybe 60 different sort of studio office spaces here, they did have one space and it was perfect. It was the right size. I had to get a darkroom built. I can't say I built it myself, but so darkroom was built, water put in, extractor fans, and then let's get on with some printing.
Yeah. I've only, in terms of this particular show, although I suppose Fran May, the photographer a little further north from here. Oh, in fact, no, she's out in the West Country, isn't she? But she worked in Sheffield for a long, long time making photographs. But that's the only other darkroom I think I visited prior to going to Robin Bell's darkroom, which is it's near Hastings, isn't it?
I think so. St Leonard's, Hastings.
St Leonard's. Now, that's the only other darkroom we visited on this programme, and I found that fascinating. He is a massive inspiration to me with his printing, and there's not a lot of you around now, specialist printers with real knowledge.
I think, as I said, I first moved to London in '84 after college. At that time, the British Journal of Photography had maybe 7-8 pages of jobs coming out every week or every 2 weeks.
Not now.
And interestingly, a lot of those jobs were with labs. When I moved to London, I got a job within 2 weeks at a studio and lab in Covent Garden. I thought, well, I'll do this for 6 months, and I'll probably learn, I'll meet some photographers and I'll get a job as an assistant. And, I was there for 9 years before I then moved on for my own place.
So was the idea then to be a photographer rather than a printer?
I think originally, the college I went to was very traditional in its teaching, and I think the aspiration you were given was to become an assistant. So it was a very try course of going to London. Everything was very London centric then. Thankfully, it's as you know, certainly in photography that's not the case now. But yes, it was very much sort of come to London, get work as an assistant, and then that'll progress you. Well, that probably was my plan, and all throughout this time I've always passionately worked on my own photographic work. Yeah. I got very settled into the darkroom, and in this particular case, the photographer John Blomfield, who had been working in London since the late 50s, he had a side business as a commercial darkroom. I started off as an assistant there. Within 3 years, I was running the actual darkroom. And it was then maybe 6 years after that I then sort of moved into to work in a more specialist lab.
Your photography, I know that you do, is really important, and we're going to talk about that today. Let's walk a bit further into this space.
Yeah, so we got
there's a huge press here. Oh, don't you love sounds?
Dry mounting press, not used for dry mounting. I have the drying racks here. That's all the prints once finished are squeegeed, put out on blotting paper on the drying racks.
Squeegeed? I heard somebody say recently, don't squeegee.
Film, yes, yeah, maybe there's the reluctance to squeegee film, because if you've got one little bit of dirt, you're going to have that scratch all the way down the film. But yes, with the darkroom prints, once they're properly washed, they'll be squeegeed, put out to dry. Then the next morning, as you see, they are slightly curled.
Yeah.
And then with the mounting press, it's not used for mounting. There's 2 sheets of acid-free mount board, and put in there for a few minutes, and they'll be coming out flat.
Only a few minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Over here, slightly newer, Epson Stylus Pro 9880. So, well, if you know the more modern part of the room.
Yes, but if you know Epson printers, you'll probably realise that's not the most recent of Epson printers. But yeah, as I said, I started working in the darkroom in 1984. I had an interest in digital printing, quite early on. At the time, I was sharing space with photographers, so I was looking at what they were doing with Photoshop version 2, I believe. So I'd certainly had dabbled with digital printing. And then perhaps, I think it was maybe about 16 years ago, I had actually spent a year living in Germany after the sort of, after digital had sort of decimated London's printing side. And then when coming back, I decided to start offering digital printing as well. And for a while, I was doing probably more digital than darkroom. But yeah, with over 10 years or more, I'm doing I'd say maybe 70% darkroom work and the rest digital.
So now it's reverted the other way. You are a traditional specialist printer using digital 30% of the time.
That's probably about a rough average. Right. Yes, right. I've always specialised in silver gelatin darkroom printing, but I enjoy working digitally as well, and it's gives more chances to work for a larger client base.
Explain, if you will, silver gelatin.
Well, silver gelatin is really the gallery description used for a traditional black and white photographic print, printed on fibre-based photographic paper, processed in the darkroom. Interestingly, for American listeners, it's the other way around. It's gelatin silver.
Ah, I did not know that.
Yeah, but it's you'll see them, in usually sort of in descriptions in photographic books, often in galleries that underneath will have silver gelatin print, and it's the silver gelatin is the silver salts, the light sensitive silver salts are suspended within a gelatin which is coated onto the Baryta photographic paper base. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's the basic rundown. And it's similar with digital printing. It's coming in more frequently now, but for a long time, photographers, artists, curators, gallerists were reluctant to put inkjet prints as the description of the prints.
It doesn't sound as romantic as silver gelatin, does it?
No, there was
or as expensive.
A very common one early on was giclée, which is the French word for to spray.
So if you saw giclée print, of course, that would be digital.
A giclée print is just simply an inkjet print, but with a French title. Yeah. But that term's maybe used more now when an artist's paintings or whatever are reproduced and printed for print sales. The more common gallery description name for an inkjet print has been archival pigment print, which is wonderful because it's on archival materials, it uses a pigment and it has nothing to do with inkjet. However, I have noticed in the last few years that more and more times I'm seeing the term inkjet print. Yeah. I went to see the Elton John exhibition at the V&A recently, and I think all the digital prints were classified as inkjet. But of course, all the darkroom prints were classified as gelatin silver, because the exhibition came from America.
That's something I've learned today. I'm seeing a print here. This is a Martin Parr print. It's a Messerschmitt in cold weather.
It's in bad weather. It's from one of Martin's very early series, Bad Weather, where I think he spent maybe 6 or 7 years.
Am I allowed to pick this print up? I've leant forward and just picked a print up without realising it could have some intense value.
If it was signed, it would have a good value to it. But
you'd be saying, put that down there. I'll try not to reach out, just grab things.
But yeah, since I've had the pleasure of printing Martin's darkroom prints for quite a few years now, and I always say it's one of the sort of the joys of this work is that you really get you get a lot of time to really study a photographer's work. There's the technical side, how you'll work in the dark room, the dodging and burning, the choice of contrast exposures to get the technical sort of details correct. But you really all this time you're really sort of studying the work, and if you can spend maybe up to 2 hours working in a print and still really enjoy looking at the photograph, it's a good photograph.
Yeah, there's something about that particular one that I absolutely adore. Right, we're just walking. There's an L shape before it turns back on itself to go into the dark room itself. A load of books here. I'm always intrigued by what books are collected. Brian Griffin, I know, is there for a particular reason, and we'll talk about Brian Griffin because you've done a lot of printing for the late Brian Griffin. Who else do we have here? Martin Parr. John Myers.
John's I've been working for about 15 years. Fascinating photographer. He was working in the Black Country area where he still lives, and he spent maybe 10 years working on photographic projects while working as an art teacher. And he stopped, and his archive was rediscovered, I'd say about 15 years ago, by Pete James, who at the time was the head of photography at the Library of Birmingham. And it's been a really, really good working relationship ever since. So I've spent a lot of time printing his work for exhibitions, for portfolios, for print sales. And then he got taken in by RRB Photo Books in Bristol as one of the main publishers of photography books in the UK. Often with these sort of projects, the book will be published, but there'll be a collector's edition which comes with a signed print.
Right.
In fact, all of John's first 3 books came with a 5x4 print.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So with each book, I had about 550 prints to make. plus the sort of ones for the 10/8 special edition.
What a lovely, to have a book that comes with a print.
Yeah.
That's pretty special, isn't it?
Yeah, I think with this particular publishers, they like to add a certain degree of value to the work. And yes, it's been really fascinating to see how John's work's been really sort of grown in stature since Pete sort of found him again all this time.
Some other books here. We've got Mark Neville. We've interviewed Mark Neville on the programme before. Simon Norfolk. I recognise this. Obsolete and Discontinued, which I will come to because that's one of your works. More Martin Parr. I think you must have every Martin Parr book going.
Oh no! I think I've got maybe about 15 or something. There's I think the last interview I heard of him, he mentioned that he might have produced 100 books by now.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So,
you got a bit of collecting to do.
Yeah.
Just rewinding slightly before we move into your darkroom, how much value do you think that a print brings to a book? You said it seems to have an added value doing that. And I think certainly for book collectors, to have a print alongside a book,
It's of course more expensive to buy. Say for example, if the book costs £60, the book with special edition print is going to be at least £200 or more. But I think it's a way for people to add, to either start or add to a collection at maybe not the high prices that some prints can cost from galleries.
You must have a lot of prints hanging about your house and various other places where you store and securely save it.
Not so many, sadly.
Do you not?
No, because they,
all these prints of famous photographers you make.
Yeah, but as I say, they're mostly for them, and sometimes.
Don't you ever think one for you, one for me?
It doesn't really work that way.
Does it not?
No. But
Am I being a bit unethical?
Well, some prints need to be kept for references if they're printed a time again. Now and again, clients will sign a print for you, so that's your print.
Yeah.
Which is always a wonderful pleasure.
Yeah.
So I have a small collection, and sadly I can't afford to go to the galleries and buy prints myself, but I sometimes will buy the book of other photographers' works with special edition prints, so that's how I can sort of get a small collection of signed prints myself.
But isn't that the irony that the galleries, you can't afford to buy the prints, but you probably made some of the prints?
Yes, that's the irony.
That seems a very unfair irony. Right, let's take a march through to your darkroom. Darkrooms are magical places. We're standing under the red light at the moment. Not that you can tell on a podcast, of course. Should we have the main light on for a second, just so that... there we go. It's on a rope pull that goes all the way across the room. So, darkrooms. Discuss. Design of. They're all very personal, aren't they?
Yes, they are. I quite often get emails saying, "Oh, can I come and use the darkroom?" I have to explain that it's not a hired darkroom, but they say, "Well, but surely I can use it when you're not using it." It's a very personal place.
Yeah.
Imagine if you contacted your garage saying, "Can I come and just do a bit of work on my car when you're not working on your car?
Well, initially I was thinking, what about a chef? I mean, you wouldn't necessarily ring up Gordon and say, Gordon, I fancy preparing a couple of special omelettes in your house, in your kitchen. It just wouldn't happen, would it?
No, you'd have to buy those expensive omelettes. My prints are probably cheaper.
So this is designed by you. This is, I mean, the space moving between enlarger and tanks. It's you're doing it in the dark. I know you have a red light, but you need to know where you're moving. You can almost do it with your eyes closed, I'm sure.
There's always a flow in a dark room. You always have to think logically. There's two sides. There's always a wet side and a dry side.
Right.
And it's important, obviously, that you don't...
Never the twain meet?
No. And I'm one of these... You have this idea of people rubbing prints with their fingers. I've not put my finger in a solution of developer or fixer for maybe 25 years. And that was only because I was actually featured on a commercial where they wanted a darkroom scene and the director didn't want me to wear rubber gloves.
Right.
During for the film. And
did you get danger money?
I actually got very well paid for that. I also got paid to construct a darkroom set, which they didn't actually use.
Oh,
no, they just zoomed in onto the tray.
Right.
But yes, so it's important to I'm very sort of aware of contamination, so I always wear rubber gloves when I'm printing. I never put my fingers in the solutions. The dry side, on this side we got 3 enlargers.
So a De Vere, a Leica,
and two De Veres,
right, two De Veres,
with the Ilford multigrade heads, which means you can control the contrast and exposures all together. The multigrade being grades 0 to 5, which are the grades of contrast. So a very contrasty negative will need a lower grade paper filtration, and likewise, very, very low contrast negative will need a high filtration. And they are not the newest of equipment, but there isn't much made today. These particular enlargers, I've been using these ones for about over 30 years now.
They're the originals that you bought 30 years ago?
They're the original second-hand ones I bought 30 years ago. But they've been serviced, and the De Veres are great, great engineered enlargers, and they'll be working for a lot longer, hopefully.
Some printers talk about over the years that they find that they become allergic. They get allergic reactions to some of the chemicals in the process used. Does that happen to you at all?
No, thankfully. Dermatitis, different forms of dermatitis, and that's through skin contact with chemicals,
right.
And that's one reason why I purposely never put my fingers. I always have gloves, rubber gloves on when printing. I have heard of people having sort of some conditions. One printer, she had an allergy to platinum materials, and she specialised in that process. I've heard of such things, but yes, I've sort of I think I've survived so far.
What about the smells, the fumes?
Well, when possible, I use odorless chemicals. They're a bit more expensive, but they haven't got the strong acidic smells. The other very, very, very important part of any darkroom layout is the ventilation. And I have, a good powerful extractor fan, and it's purposely, over the wet bench towards where the fixers are. And then the other opposite end of the darkroom, there's a ventilation grill. So that is, so the extractor fan is taking the air out, but fresh air is coming in.
Right. What's an adult poncho doing in here? Waterproof, hooded, lightweight, reusable poncho.
Shall we move on?
Right. Wet side rather.
Yeah, so on this side, we've got the room for... I print up to 20 by 24 inch, 50, 60 centimetres comfortably, and importantly archival. So I can wash fully. I have a vertical wash tank which has individual channels for all the prints.
Yes.
I also use Hypo Eliminator, which is a salt bath that's used after the print's been initially washed, and that sort of helps to remove, fully remove all the sort of acidic materials from the paper base coming from the fixer. And then, sort of then fully washed. And as said, I don't use a drum dryer or a heat press dryer. I use, I squeegee the prints on glass, and then they dry naturally overnight.
Yeah. There's a dry. This cabinet over here is for your. That's for drying the.
Yeah, for the odd occasions when I'm processing film. Yes, use a film drying cabinet.
Mm. Do you process much film?
Not a great deal these days.
No. 'Cause that was once upon a time. That was the main income for printers, wasn't it? It was really more about the film than it was about the printing.
Yeah, because if you imagine that, prior to digital, which I'm trying to think when that was. I think it was a period of about in the late 1990s, that everything moved very, very quickly. And up till then, like, for example, I'd worked for advertising clients, advertising photographers, editorial photographers, fashion photographers. One by one, it changed. The first to go was advertising. They were the first to embrace digital.
Yeah.
Probably linked to the cost at that time. And then editorial, and then fashion. Yeah, fashion remained for a long time. There was, working at the time. It was slightly bigger. I was working with another printer, Gabby Gassner, and while we worked on together, the same company, we had our own separate client bases. Yeah. But that was great because those clients would bring in a lot of film, and that's what made the money.
Do you miss those days? The heady days.
Yes, they were sort of a very, very good time to be working.
But you've always, in many respects, kept yourself to yourself. You've preferred a sort of more solitary way of working.
I think that's just naturally come. I did have the opportunity to join another lab at different times. Larger labs, and they're still going today. But I think once you're used to working on your own,
yes,
it's difficult to sort of think of going back to the 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 or 9 to 8 as it might be. For the people like myself who are still printing, there are a couple of labs that sort of larger labs that have specialist printing, but most of us are one-man bands.
What's the soundtrack of the darkroom? Are you a music-led printer, or do you like silence?
No, I found over the last few years that I've increasingly listening more to podcasts and audiobooks.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yes, keep you at work. But yeah, so sort of a mixture of music and so actually audiobooks not so much because you just can't concentrate. Because you're so busy thinking about the print, you lose track of the plot.
Timings and stuff. Have I missed anything in here? Is there anything unique to your working space? I mean, I've been in a fair few darkrooms in my life.
Lots of boxes of photographic paper.
Yeah.
We're really mostly just using Ilford now. I say we, I mean myself and other printers. There's Foma papers coming from the Czech Republic, and we use them sometimes. But yeah, sadly, that's really the extent of the paper produced now.
So the Czech Republic papers, what are they like?
They're very good. They make similar papers to Ilford. They make a neutral, classic black and white paper and a warm tone paper.
Well, let's go and look at some of this work. I'm still quite intrigued by what that adult poncho is all about, I've got to say.
It's a joke.
We're going to talk a lot about your work, but those that you print for, I've got to start with Elliott Erwitt. I might be doing this in the wrong order. I've started with dessert because I'm a fond fan, as many are, of Elliott's work. Found Not Lost, the book, is something that's very familiar with you, or to you, because you worked on pretty much every print in this book, didn't you?
Yes, I think about 95% of the work. Elliott Erwitt was, the name, one of those names that you knew from the very beginning when you first got into photography.
Yeah.
Probably my oldest photography book, it's called World Photography, edited by Bryn Campbell. And this was, I remember, it was quite a special present, Christmas present or birthday present.
The book that we're looking at here.
It was £15, and that was back in the 70s. So that's a pretty expensive present, and it's a book that's remained with me. And of course, one of the photographers featured was Elliott Erwitt.
Erwitt, yeah.
So it's a name I'd known since. Now I'm no way was Elliott Erwitt's printer. You know, he always had a lab in New York printing. So it's interesting. You know, we talked a bit about different clients, and you know, a lot of my work is working for clients that had, you know, working relationship for many years, decades sometimes. But other work, you know, are one-off individual projects, and these are mostly through photo book publishing, and particularly, you know, something like this Elliott Erwitt book, which is published by Ghost Books, and the publishers. Stuart Smith is both the designer and the publisher from Ghost Books. He's a very well-known book designer. He's worked for photography books for many years, you know, especially for Magnum photographers. And he was a very close friend of Elliott's. You know, I think they'd worked together on maybe 15 books. And he contacted me to say that, you know, we're working on another Elliott book, and the premise was that I think he said Elliott's got 500,000 negatives in his New York apartment. And during lockdown, they thought they'd go back and have a check for those ones that, you know, that were missed. And they found a sort of large collection of different negatives that for some reason or other had never been printed. You know, maybe they were part of a, you know, sort of another series. Yeah. So they went back to revisit work that had escaped, you know, had never been printed over time.
Hence found, not lost.
Yes. And what was fascinating is that, you know, if you think Elliott Erwitt, you're thinking 35mm black and white. But the first section of the book is all 120.
Oh, is it?
Shot on Rolleiflex.
Right.
And
I'll go back to that now.
Yeah, so I think maybe 15-20% of the book was actually 2.25 square. And that was really fascinating to see that work. And, you know, of course, there's a lot of it shot in Europe and in France and Italy.
I would imagine Elliott, of course, would have known you were working on this, though.
Oh, yes. I you know, sadly, I didn't have any personal contact with Elliott. I did sort of, I was in touch quite a bit with Mio, who's his studio, he looked after his studio. You know, my contact really was through Stuart, the designer. So that was most of the correspondence. And I did have to, I think he was, you know, sort of, there were two of us in the offing for the job. So I did have to pass the audition, let's say.
Well, I think what a privilege to be able to work with Elliott Erwitt's negatives to produce the prints for this book. Surely the negatives must have come by Securicor or something. They've got a lot of value.
Oh, I think they came with the designer. But if you think about it, you think, well, you know, these days, don't you just scan the negative and use that as or scan or print? Well, this work had never been printed before, so there were no prints to scan. And they wanted the prints because, well, Elliott's always worked this way. Yes. The work is always printed. And also, you know, they'd then have a set of prints that could be exhibited. So I first had to print 4 negatives on 2 different papers, warm tone and neutral, and get them sent over to New York. And I got the go-ahead that Elliott was happy with the test prints, and they were all on 1114 paper, which is more the American standard size compared to the British 12x16, and then given free rein to go ahead.
So it's about 200 prints, wasn't it? Or
I think I might have had 210 negatives to print.
Right. Okay.
Not all were used.
Yeah.
I seem to remember there were 1 or 2 which I really liked. For some reason or other, didn't meet the final edit. Yeah. Stuart, as I say, Stuart's a really well-known and very good and creative designer.
Yes.
But he'll have very strong ideas about what works.
Well, what did you learn about Elliott Erwitt? Because you do learn about photographers printing their work. You learn about how they photographed. You learn about composition. I mean, I know that you only got a strip each time, didn't you? Would have been nice to have had the entire shoot.
Yes, that was.
That you could see his way of working. You know?
That was inevitable sadness because it's interesting to see what the photographer's working on. Because sometimes they're, and when I say snap, I don't mean in a degrading way, but sometimes they're just a quick photograph. But I think one of the things you learn from doing this, which I think the photographs were taken over a 50-year period, is how consistent he was in working.
I
know he hadn't. I don't think he'd been doing hardly any photography in the last years. So you could really see, and it was really interesting to see his 120 work, because I'm just such a big fan myself of working 120, 2¼ square, and it was such a different look to his work.
Yeah.
And also, as you can see from the beginning, there's pictures of sort of kids and street photographs, and I think in Italy and mostly some of the work, but there's also an American work, and as always with Elliott, there's personal photographs of his wife. In fact, there was one image that I printed, which was a photograph of Robert Frank lying in bed, either pretending to be ill or somewhat hypochondriatically being ill in bed. Yeah. And when I saw the book, it wasn't there.
Oh,
Sorry, Robert.
He gave you a gift, or you were allowed to print.
Yeah, it was such a touching...
For yourself, this is?
Yes, sort of Stuart.
You made plenty of prints for other people, but you made a print for you.
Yeah, because what happened, it was done in stages, as I remember. So I do one set of prints, maybe 50. They were sent off to New York. And, inevitably now and again, there'd be feedback, can we make this one darker or lighter? Which is great, it'd be very bad of me if I said, no, that's how it should be printed. That's a really important thing about working with a photographer. You need to accept that they're not going to sort of accept everything.
No.
Because Elliott wanted his work to be not soft, but not a punchy graphic style, something that was good, strong and tonal. So I think with the last sort of prints going over, Stuart said, if you've got, let me know what your favourite image is from the book and send us a copy of that one, and I'll get Elliott to sign it to you. Oh. And
here it is.
Let's have a look.
So, describe the picture. It must have been very hard to have chosen one favourite from a book of 200 and however many.
Well, maybe I should have chosen the Robert Frank picture, as it's never been published.
Yeah.
But yes, it's. I'm not sure if the book. I think there might be the back of the book's dated, but it looks like it's maybe mid-late 50s. It's a photograph taken at a bar or outside a hotel, function room.
Yeah.
There's a very sort of well-dressed couple. He on the right's got a bow tie, dinner jacket on, hair brill cream back,
yes,
almost a quiff.
Yes,
she's wearing a fur.
There's a bit of Jackie Onassis about her.
A slight bit. She's holding a cigarette and a long cigarette holder. Sort of. I'm not quite as long as Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's, but it's this sort of era. They're both looking to their right. Something's happening. She's holding a small, delicate sort of purse or clutch bag. Yeah. She's got a bracelet on, quite large bracelets.
Why did you choose this?
I don't know.
What is it about this particular photograph?
I just found it a very, very captivating picture.
Yeah.
I think because you don't know what they're looking at. They've got slightly different expressions on. But you want to know are they waiting?
There's intrigue.
Yeah, are they waiting to go into the room?
Yes.
Or are they having a break so she can have a cigarette? I don't know. But
where's the signed bit? Oh, it's on the back, of course.
Yeah, sign on the back.
Elliott Erwitt.
Yeah,
in pencil, as it should be.
Yes. And which I thought was a very touching and very, very appreciated gift. I think.
Pop that back in its archival bag.
Yes.
I know we've got coffee nowhere near it, but I don't want to tempt fate. I would imagine. I mean, you've got some prints that have an awful lot of personal value to you. This must be one of the ones right up there.
Oh, definitely, yes.
3 words. What an honour.
Yes.
Are the words that come to mind. Let's put that one back for a moment. Studio Neil here, just for a moment. Now, I know you know who Elliott Erwitt is, but there are some lesser-known facts about him. Elliott was born in Paris in 1928 to Russian immigrant parents. His childhood involved several relocations, including moves to Italy and the United States, shaping the outlook he had on the world. His photography skills were refined during his service in the army, where he worked as a photographic assistant. But his creative talents, well, they extend well beyond photography. He directed films and documentaries under a pseudonym, André S. Solidor, an alter ego he crafted to satirize contemporary art's pretentiousness. Despite his significant contributions to photography, Erwitt is known for his humility, often highlighting the importance of the subject over the photographer. His work, well, that'll always continue to inspire, capturing life's everyday moments with plenty of wit and candour. Let's talk a bit about your work, if I may. And I want to really weave in those that you've worked with, names that you'll recognise, and your own work as well. You've already said it's a really important aspect of this whole thing, this whole love affair with printing, that you do your own work.
Oh, definitely. It's been a constant. You know, I really sort of developed more of my own personal photography maybe 25 years ago. I think it was a mixture of influences. I'd worked with this photographer Christopher Joyce, who'd originally owned my business. And sadly, he died a year and a half after starting working for him. But I think that helped me think about work more in projects. And then at the time later, just after he died, I started doing a part-time MA in photography, history and culture. Well, not a practical course, it was all text-based, but it really made me think more about sort of what photographers photograph, projects. And I definitely developed a sort of more, sort of personal style myself after that, I think. And also I think, working for someone like Brian Griffin, who I've mentioned to you, I developed more the idea of sort of, working with different influences and on different themes. A lot of my work has been very much in this sort of, say, urban landscape, sort of genre. I have been working on a few portrait projects, of recent years.
One is in front of us now. This work is Slovenian portraits. Well, Slovenian artists.
Yes,
photographed in London.
Yes, the exhibition title was Shoreditch Portraits.
Shoreditch.
Yeah, and
very posh part of London, very artistically posh.
Yes, well, it's one of those areas that when we first moved to London, it was the cheapest area, and then the artists and photographers moved in, made it a bit trendy. People started opening bars, opening clubs. Hotels started being built, and then no one can afford to work and live there now.
I remember photographing, I think it's called, is it the Ace Hotel in Shoreditch? I might have the hotel's name wrong, but it was probably one of the most arty weddings I've ever shot in Shoreditch. I remember it well.
Well, with this project, I got quite a connection to Slovenia. It was actually, sort of a friend who'd been working for me for some time, who's Slovenian. And she later sort of ended up working in the culture department at the Slovenian embassy in London. And I knew that there was a program of visiting artists. They have apartments in New York, Berlin, Vienna and London. And so every month in all these different 4 places, there would be an artist in residence. And this could be a painter, a poet, filmmaker, writer. And my friend Spela had suggested that we have this program, but there's no content. We have no sort of record really of their stay. Yeah. And I'd just been working on quite a large collaborative portrait project, very very different work with a friends, and suggested would I be interested in maybe documenting the work. So I thought yes, and I decided that as the apartments in Shoreditch in East London, it would make sense to take the portraits around the streets of Shoreditch for 2 reasons. It would unify the feel of the project. They would give different locations, but it could be. You could see that it was all in one particular area.
So these are environmental portraits, is what it would be called.
That could be. Yeah, that's a good description of it now. But also for practical reasons, that they were there, and it wouldn't take up too much of the time.
Yeah. Let's have a look at a few of them, actually. Can you explain who these people are?
Yeah, for example, this one is...
Perhaps we could put a couple on the show page?
Yes, of course.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, this is...
Might be difficult doing Elliott Erwitt's work on the show page for obvious reasons, but I'm speaking to the artist here, so it might be a bit easier.
Yeah, this one's of Otto Rimmerli, who is... Well, originally he was known as a musician. He's a guitarist, and he played for some time in the Slovenian avant-garde collective Laibach on some of their best-known work, including the rather remarkable cover version of Queen's Gebut eine Nation, otherwise One Vision. Worth checking out on YouTube.
I shall go looking for it.
Interesting, the location where that's shot is actually the art centre where I then had another exhibition of my nocturne work in Slovenia, but that's totally coincidental. But he was always a fine artist, and he still, still does some music. He got back into fine arts, and he's the... I think he's the professor of painting at the Maribor University in Slovenia now. And for his portrait, we walked a little bit further than Shoreditch, over to the Barbican Art Centre.
Oh, hence the brutalist architecture.
Yes. And I think at the time there was performances by Michael Clark, the dancer. And in fact, Laibach had collaborated with Michael Clark, maybe 30 years ago. So he was keen to try and meet someone from 30 years past. And I think it was just a sort of very interesting sort of use of the location. Yeah. So the Barbican is certainly brutalist, but for a lot of people it's an absolutely beautiful building. But what I really like about this picture, it's very much a sort of, he's quite small in the frame, but I love the stillness and the gentleness of his hands. And that came from him. I don't remember directing him to put his hands together, but for me that was so interesting about this project is that I would ask them if I'd ask them, we'd meet for coffee first, and then to say I've got a few locations, but have you seen anywhere? Often that meant there's some graffiti, and so some have graffiti. I try to avoid that purposefully. But I think Otto wanted to sort of try the Barbican. So, but also sometimes they would just do something. They would add a little, in their, just in how they presented themselves. Well,
you're working with artists, so I'm imagining that you don't have to direct them too much because they'll have their own idea of how they'd like to be interpreted or be photographed or express themselves.
Oh, very much so, yes. So not always, but in many cases they'd have strong ideas.
Yeah, very much. Square, you're working in... this one, I want you to talk about this one. But square format. Why square? Squares feature a lot in your personal work. Why?
I wish you could tell me. I did have not Rolleiflex. I had a Yashica twin lens reflex quite early on, and I enjoyed using that. And I'd certainly used Hasselblads at college. I think it was when I was working with Christopher Joyce, and the Rolleiflex was his camera of choice for personal work. Yeah. So I got used to printing his work, and that inspired me to buy a Rolleiflex myself, and they were a lot more affordable then than they are now. And I just very quickly adapted the Rolleiflex from my own work, and as I said, the majority of my own personal work was what I now sort of say is more topographical, more a record of location and place, cities, urban landscape, the man-made environment, let's say. But with portraits, I think, I always sort of try not to be too influenced by photographers visually. But if you think of the portrait photographers whose work I really like, and obviously, Brian Griffin is one, but people like Cecil Beaton, Lee Miller, their work is, so much of their work was shot on the Rolleiflex, 2.25. And, how they use the square, I always really sort of resonated with that. And I think that just carried on. I was used to using the Rolleiflex for urban landscape work. So when it came to portrait, it just naturally fed into it.
Even with your digital cameras, you've got a Fuji, and what's the other one? It's a
Lumix.
A Lumix.
Yeah.
They're both set to square, aren't they?
Well, not all the time, but yes, I
Most of the time.
Yeah, but purposely, I've used those two cameras because unlike some of the cameras, I did have a Nikon DSLR originally, just never bonded with it, and then realised that you could get cameras that did allow you to shoot square.
Who's this fine-looking chap?
Oh, this is Alan Herenthalь, who is. He's probably one of the best known people that I photograph, certainly in Slovenia. He's a theatrical costume designer. I think his main client is the Cirque du Soleil.
Oh, not bad client.
Yeah, and his. I think you should put a link to his website. His work is fabulous. Let's say, it is really colourful, bright, large. It's very joyful. His work, but. He's just very, very widely known. His work is exhibited, his drawings are exhibited and published.
He's immaculately turned out as a gentleman.
Well, we're sitting on quite a warm day today, and this, as I remember, was one of the hottest days of the year.
He's in a tartan suit.
He's wearing a tartan three-piece suit and a tartan tie.
Yes.
And there's not a drop of sweat on him.
He's one of those perfect people. I hate him already.
And I remember we actually sort of found a shady little alley.
Yes.
Which was, as you know, you just can't shoot in this sort of blazing sunlight.
No.
But we found this sort of very, sort of diffuse alley. I also shot colour digital as well, which he really liked that, and he's used that for publicity photographs quite a bit.
What was this shot on?
This was shot on FP4. By now, actually, these are shot on Mamiya 6, but again, still 2.25 square camera. Not the ideal camera for portraits as it's a rangefinder. But at the time when I started this project, I'd just acquired this new camera, so it became the camera. But he's one of those people that just looks great in photographs. Very, very distinguished looking. And I've been with him. I met him for coffee in Ljubljana. Where he lives, some of the time, and I think he's quite international. And people were coming up asking to shake his hand, and I knew he was big, but he was very big.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's fantastic work. Now, I'm looking through a book here called Pop. Oh, in the front. Dear Mike, am I allowed to read this?
Go on.
You are so important to me. Lots of love. Brian Griffin. Now, if you look through Pop, I mean, this is a who's who of musicians, isn't it? Really, nearly every single photograph in here features somebody who's a very, very famous musician, and even those the names I don't know so well, I would imagine are fairly well known.
You've heard of Brian Ferry.
Oh, I know who Brian Ferry is. Of course, I do. Just happened to be open at that page. Steve New. Who else do we have in here? Iggy Pop. Goodness. As I say, A to Z.
Specials?
Specials, yeah. Goodness, yeah, the specials. So, Brian Griffin, tell me about him. You have a very special relationship with him. He's printed through you for many years.
I think it's just about 25 years. We worked together. I worked for him. And unlike some sort of other clients, he was a photographer whose work I'd known for a long time. I think I'd probably seen his work, maybe an amateur photographer, but I really noticed it. 1978, going to see Echo and the Bunnymen in a small club in Edinburgh, my hometown. Wonderful gig, and the album was out the following week, I think. And Brian had this very dark, very strange, multicoloured lit photograph of the Bunnymen in a forest. And so, I bought the album because that was inevitably going to happen. Certainly noted the photographer. He photographed the next album cover, Heaven Up Here, which was very different. It was shot on a beach in Wales, the four silhouetted musicians standing, in the sunset while a sort of a flock of seagulls. That was a band.
Yeah, it was.
Prefer the Bunnymen. They were flying above. And so I really followed Brian's work, for a long, long time. And I got the chance to initially work with him in the late 90s. He'd actually stopped photographing. For a time, he was probably the best paid photographer in the UK. He'd started off, working for a management magazine. Not the most, not the most sexiest, glamorous. He wanted to be a fashion photographer. But the art director, Roland Schenk, really put him to work. And he learned a lot from him. He got many influences, German expressionist cinemas, the writings of Franz Kafka, and that fed into his work. He always said that he wasn't influenced by photographers. He was influenced by other art forms, by paintings, by films, by literature, the Bible. So I'd known his work for such a long time. So I was quite nervous when I got a call from a client I'd worked for, a producer, of advertising shoots, saying that, Brian's, I knew that Brian had stopped taking photographs because he was just working purely in moving image, and he'd be making short films, lots of television commercials, pop videos. But he wanted to get back into photography, and he'd been commissioned for an advertising shoot, and his printer, I think, had moved to Australia. So I was, asked if I could, come in and process some film and do the work on this. Yeah, I've been working ever since together. And I just learned so much through Brian about, obviously about his work, but I think in a lot of ways in my own photography, I've probably sort of sought out influences outside of photography myself.
Yeah, because you said to me when we first met before we started rolling the tape, as they say, that actually influentially you don't necessarily look to photographers or photography, which is strange because you're working, printing so much work from other photographers, but you try and choose influences in other ways.
I think so, and I know that's I don't think I've borrowed or been influenced visually so much by Brian, but definitely that way of thinking. If I did a large series, an exhibition on Berlin over 20 years ago, and I know I was reading a lot about the city. I was watching films set in Berlin. I think that's why I was picking up influences, and again with Brian, it was all about his influences. In fact, one of the big projects I worked on for him was for an exhibition in Reykjavik called Influences, and this it wasn't done chronologically, but the exhibition was laid out with different sections showing different influential work. Like, for example, to go back to Echo and the Bunnymen, the second album sleeve I mentioned, Heaven Up Here, has the four figures looking out. And this is something he definitely, got from the German romantic painter Caspar David Friedrich, who always had this figure. Figure, okay. Not always, but many of his paintings, featured the figure back to the back to the subject looking out. And that's something that Brian sort of returned to quite a lot, this figure, because it becomes me, it becomes the every person. We see this a lot now in paperback, covers, especially on crime fiction, the silhouette man.
Oh yeah.
Which maybe a little bit, you see too much of that on crime books. But the Reykjavik exhibition, that was wonderful, because I think there's maybe 150 images in that. Some colour, some, but mostly black and white. And that was another thing with Brian, is that it sort of gave you excuses for trips now and again. Because, there'd be exhibitions, there'd be several in France, in Paris and the Arles Festival, several in the UK, in the Black Country, in Derby, at the Format Festival, which he was a very proud patron of. Wonderful fun times in Łódź, in Poland. And for as long, for the last 15 years, I was probably printing as much of Brian's work digitally as I was in the darkroom. Right. Mostly it was for print sales, if it wasn't exhibition work. There's a lot of collectors. Well, a lot of people were into his work through his music photography, particularly Depeche Mode's. He'd worked on their first 5 album covers. Yeah. The last work I did for him was actually an exhibition of Depeche Mode's work, which was exhibited, sadly, 2 days before he died, in January, which was, as you can imagine, a complete shock. Yeah. And he's going to be very, very sorely missed.
He's certainly one of the people that I wish I'd had a chance to speak with.
Well, the thing is, there were so many stories. You could speak to him about any. He also had an incredible memory. You might ask about a certain image. He'd probably end up drawing lighting diagrams. He'd explain how he photographed Douglas Adams, the author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I think that involved, cutting a perspex sheet, stick his head through, project the light through this perspex, have a second camera set up with bouncing ping pong balls on black velvet. Basically, he was producing a montage, but in camera. Yeah. It was all before Photoshop.
Yeah, amazing.
A lot of people have seen his work in the more recent years, assuming it was digital, but he was very, very detailed. He actually came from an engineering background, so in some cases, you'd actually build machines to help him photograph, lighting machines.
That brings us very neatly onto this particular image here. You described it as something.
It's the Big Bang.
The Big Bang.
And it was taken...
Describe the picture for me, if you will.
Well, again, going back to Friedrich and the solitary figure, he's looking towards the city of London that's illuminated by huge firework lighting up the night sky. Down below, there are sort of construction work happening. Yeah. You can see the marks.
Spotlights.
The spotlights. There's vast metal tubes. There's so many things happening in this photograph. But it's a commercial commission.
What's done on film?
What's done on 5x4 film? There were 7 sheets of film used. And it was when the City of London was deregulated, the Big Bang. So there's 2 Big Bangs.
Right.
There's a visual representation of it using a firework, but it was for a 2-page advert in the Financial Times. So you can imagine how much that would cost.
Yeah.
The only thing is, it was shot the night before it had to be printed. If you're anywhere near the Victoria and Albert Museum, there's a large print currently on display of this work. As I say, it's this solitary figure, a construction worker, looking up to the exploding city. Yeah. And even though Brian's personal politics were certainly sort of more to the left, let's say, he had been described as Thatcher's favourite photographer because a lot of his work was done in that sort of that time, the yuppie time of the 80s and 90s. Yeah. So this photograph was to advertise, the City of London being deregulated, which has led to quite a few things. But it's an incredible photograph, but it's all shot on film. It's all shot for real. And I believe he had to sign an insurance policy that he was personally responsible should any glass be damaged by the firework. By the sound of this massive industrial firework. Yeah. And looking at the picture, there was probably tens of thousands of sheets of glass. And even though they were allowed, they did have permission from the police, the City of London Police Force. After 2, maybe three of the fireworks had gone off, the police decided they had to shut the show down. Oh. Brian had to keep on working because he had to make sure he'd finish this, get this shot in the bag. So I think there might have been a case of assistants were sort of not fending off physically, representatives of Her Majesty's finest. But yes, there was definitely pressure for him to stop working. Yeah. But I think he got as far as shooting 7 sheets of 5x4 film. I'd say he pretty captured it.
Yeah, I say nailed that.
He always said that it was just not quite there, because if you look into the distance, you see a crane, and he wanted this to be more visual, so you could see that it was a symbolic of the cross.
Oh, yes.
There was always something to see in Brian's photographs that you might not realise.
Good Lord. Well, quite literally.
Yeah, but it is an incredible photograph. It is. And I'm glad to say it's one of the ones he signed for me. So
again, what a privilege again to have worked with a photographer of his stature. Sadly missed.
Very, very missed.
Very missed. Yeah.
Some additional side notes to my conversation a moment ago with Mike about Brian Griffin. He is this wonderfully celebrated British photographer, sadly no longer with us. But he's well known for his distinctive, often surreal style in portrait and corporate photography. He masterfully blends reality with a touch of bizarre, creating striking and whimsical images that certainly stand out. There's a couple of funny stories about him, including where he had executives don scuba gear and photograph them in a water-filled boardroom, humorously symbolising the pressures of the corporate world. In another memorable instance, he persuaded a group of serious bankers to pose as rock stars, complete with leather jackets and electric guitars, strumming in the air, resulting in a hilariously incongruous yet impactful series of photographs. His talent for infusing humour and creativity into his work made him a unique figure in photography, transforming ordinary subjects into captivating and often amusing works of art.
Let's look at two more projects of yours, Mike. Now, these are two very are two very contrasting projects in many ways. Sky and then Nocturne. Sky, beautiful place I've yet to actually tick off my list, believe it or not.
Oh, I'm surprised. Just knowing your connection with the Black Isle and everything.
Yeah.
I thought you might have
No, not yet.
over the sea, as it were. No?
I've got to do that journey. You've done it for me in this particular project of yours. Tell me about the project first of all, and about Sky.
I don't. I didn't really consider it a project. It's just I've been to Sky quite a few times, and strangely enough, it's maybe the closest I get to photo walks. Is I've got a group of friends that for maybe 20 years now, every couple of years we'll often go to Sky. Friend Charlie's knows a particular cottage way off the beaten track. And yes, other times we've been to other places, but we've just sort of been repeatedly going to Sky for some time. It's an incredibly beautiful place, and while they're interested, they're in 5/4 black and white landscape photography, and they do beautiful work. I'm surprisingly find myself a bit inhibited by the landscape, and I sometimes don't know what I can do with it. How can I match the grandeur?
It's a fantastic place. As a landscape photographer, it's a chocolate box place, to use that phrase.
Yeah, so I never really think of myself as a landscape photographer, but over the years, I've been snapping away maybe to say, some color digital work, and I started looking more and more at it. I've been the last 2 years running. Actually, we've managed to get there. And actually, the last visit was in March. It was an experiment to see what it was like, pretty much off season. And I think it was the sort of time we had the least rain. Yeah. We had no midges because they're more of a summer delight. And so yes, I've been looking back at the sort of work I've been photographing, and over quite a few visits to Sky. And I've been working out a sequence. Sort of thinking it could be a self-published book or maybe a series of zines, perhaps. What I've found very interesting is how photographs taken 10 years ago, once worked out in an editorial sequence, can work with photographs taken this year, and how it can make a narrative out of these rather disparate images.
And the narrative is visitors.
I suppose it is how the visitor reacts to Sky.
Yes.
And there have been changes to Sky. It's every year it's become more and more popular. I'd say it's one of the most popular destinations in the UK now, I'd imagine. And I'm saying this myself as a tourist. I'm not in any way so I'm just commenting on how popular. There's definitely a sort of a feeling, at least from the locals, that the onslaught of the camper van is it's it's a great, I can imagine it's a great way to travel.
I know from talking to those who live in the Highlands that these camper vans aren't necessarily the most welcome sight, because they bring people in, but they don't necessarily bring investment in, because they come in their vans with everything that they already need, and occasionally they leave more behind than they probably should.
Oh, I'm sure that most are very responsible.
Absolutely.
I think there should be a law that they're not allowed on the island with any food purchases. They've all got to be bought at the Co-op in Broadford. one of only two supermarkets, and the other one's a Co-op too, so they got the monopoly. But no, it's interesting to look at these photographs again. I've made an initial sequence of maybe 60 pages, but it doesn't really include. Yes, it includes the landscape, but I'm finding it difficult to sort of think of them as being pure landscape photographs. Sometimes they involve how we react within the landscape. Yes, that photograph you mentioned. Yes, he was on holiday with his wife, and we were just stopping for a coffee and got chatting. And then when we looked back, he'd got out his huge digital camera, massive lens, and he was off photographing, as we were.
Yeah. Now, the next project, Nocturne, photographed on Delta 3200, which is a film stock. I've got a good few rolls of Delta 3200. These are pictures of, well, it's almost night. Nocturne.
Yeah, it's work I started over 10 years ago. One of the processes I've often used in my commercial printing work is lith printing, which trying to keep a short history of. It's using photographic materials and chemicals that were designed for the reprographic industry before it went digital. That's the printing industry for books, magazines. And often illustrations and text were required purely black on white or black on clear film, which were then sort of used to make plates in the reproduction process. And there was lith paper and lith film and lith developer. And the idea was that would produce pure black on white, no tones whatsoever. It was a very high, powerful developer, mixed together A and B, developed for 3 minutes, gave pure black image on white. Now, obviously, people experimented by printing conventional negatives and got this pure black and white image, but found that in between the 3 minutes it took to reach absolute pure black, in between this time, there was a slight period where you'd see a pictorial image appear, which then developed very quickly. But if you managed to get it out of the developer and stopped and fixed, you would find this rather curious and beautiful looking image, which was pure black shadows, white highlights, and a reddish brownish midtones. But often these midtones are a very compressed feeling. And one bright spark decided, well, why don't we just dilute the developer so we can slow down this process? Instead of 3 minutes, it became 9 minutes or 12 minutes. And then there'd be a better opportunity to sort of grab the print. So that was how lith printing finally, first came known. I think it was in the 1970s. Right. I think, thinking of the work of photographers around that time. Maybe in the 60s, actually, but really was noted first in the 1970s. Now, these papers, these lith papers, were discontinued, in the 1980s, really, because there was no need for them. Desktop publishing had produced a new way of, in scanning, had produced a new way of producing, prints for reproduction or text. But some photographic papers would give the same feel of a lith print, but, not all. And one was Seagull Oriental, a paper made in Japan. Now, I'm sure most people will know the work of Anton Corbin. And a lot of his work was lith printed on this material. And that was all directly thanks and due to Mike Spry, who was, let's say, one of the London printers, one of the best known London printers, the generation before me, and he was amongst the printers that I got to know a while back, and they were great. We were all friendly rivals, let's say, but there was a respect, definitely sort of strong respect, and there was always the feeling that you don't poach other clients, but there were always other people you could turn to chat to. So yeah, I knew that Mike had done all his prints for Anton, and when Seagull went out of business, or certainly the company that was making this paper stopped making it, I managed to buy about maybe over 1,000 sheets, 1,500 sheets of paper. And it's slowly, there's not so much left. Now. Yeah, so maybe when that's finally finished, that's the end of the project. But with lith printing, I've described the actual chemical process. It's the same with exposing and developing film. If you want more contrast, you give less exposure to the print and increase the development time, and that will give a stronger, grittier lith print. Likewise, if you increase the exposure time and then give less development, that will give a softer, often more colourful print. So that's just a little bit of the technical side. The paper I use for this work, I then scan the prints and then make larger prints for digital prints for exhibition. But the basis of the project, I'd taken some photographs on the Thames at night in London, and I tried lith printing them, and it had this graphic feel which reminded me of the nocturne paintings by the painter Whistler. So I started putting a project together, or let's say just ideas from this. I found it a bit limiting. I then looked at some other negatives shot on the same film, but in different locations, and then realised that actually it's too limiting for London. And certainly just for the Thames. So I then started putting cities together. And then looking at the work again, I'd had a couple of small exhibitions in Germany of some of the work. I realised that the problem I personally had was, certainly in pictures of London, I didn't want to have anything too recognisable. One of the early ones I liked prominently had the Houses of Parliament.
Right.
But as it's such a sort of recognised, image worldwide, I removed those and then decided that I should concentrate just on more sort of unseen locations. A lot of the work's been shot in Berlin. Now, admittedly, if you know Berlin, you'll probably know some of these locations. But I've tried, where possible, to photograph. And these are taken usually on city breaks, holidays, to different places. I'll go out at dusk. It's
So that's what it makes it look like night. You're going out at dusk, shooting on 3200 film. You end up with these very mysterious, sometimes very foggy scenes. There's one here that's made in Norway, and we've got essentially your own city.
Yes, I always say
this is a sort of fantasy city project.
Well, I always say it's like a night walk through an imagined city.
Yes.
Again, to talk about influences, another visual influence came with watching the French Nouvelle Vague film Alphaville by Jean-Luc Godard, which I think was 1965. And he shot this film in black and white, and it was mostly shot at night in Paris. And it's a bit of it's a classic, but it's meant to be a pulp film, but a science fiction film. And the conceit is that Paris at night is the future. And you just meant to accept that this is the future.
Right.
It's not. But what's interesting is that I could sometimes see some visual similarities in some of my photographs with the work from this film. And especially that I sometimes include solitary characters, which are usually shadows, photographed. In fact, one particular image.
Is that you?
No, that's not me. This one's taken in the Fernsehturm, the TV tower in Berlin, which would have been East Berlin originally. And I purposely wanted to be up in the observation, rooms as dusk fell, to see this, see Berlin change from night to day. And there's the very, very last bit of light, sort of illuminating through the windows. And I just saw this figure, which looked like he might have been out of 50s.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
50s noir film.
Yeah.
I immediately thought of Harry Lime in the Third Man, and it was just someone wearing a long coat and a hat.
Yeah.
Not for any effect. That's what he wore, and just followed him around. Managed to get a few frames, and was delighted with the finished work. If you look, you can actually see he's actually leaning against the barrier, the banister on the window, looking out to Berlin.
That's a glorious picture. What a wonderful project. Nocturne. We'll leave maybe we can put some pictures on the show page
sure. Yeah, so
of this. Wonderful work.
It's because
you maybe want to go and dust off my 3200 film.
Yeah, and see if you've got any lith paper lying around.
I won't have that lying around. I think there's only one place I know of that might have that, and I'm sitting in it.
But yeah, so some of them are purposely day for night.
Yes.
Yeah, so one of the favourite ones is a gasometer, and it's taken in a very, very early misty morning.
With a bird.
Yeah, and but because of the process, it can be printed so heavy that it just has the appearance of the night and fits into the sequence.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it turns out that everyone I speak to in London about this picture has their own gasometer. They say, is that Bethnal Green? Is that sort of down in South London?
When I saw it, we have one close to us. Well, we used to, because they're gradually being dismantled.
Yeah.
And I'll return to Mike in a moment. It's the first Friday in August, or at least the release date of this podcast is, so we need a new assignment. One-word assignments this year. The one that caught our eye for last month is still being discussed. So watch this space. But in the meantime, let's challenge you for August, shall we?
The Photo Walk assignment.
Emily, it's a one-word assignment. What's your one word going to be? And just explain a little bit about what you're perhaps looking for.
Okay, so my one word is going to be energy. And I probably go for energy because whenever I get really good feedback from a bride or from a mum or a dad, it's usually because they love the energy in my pictures. And it's also a good word because it makes you work hard at your frames and what you include in a frame, what you decide to leave out. So it makes you think about composition, about movement and about emotion, but all in one way. So energy.
The email address to send your assignment pictures into is, as ever, stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you can resize them, optimize them for the website, then please, 2,500 pixels wide, you're an absolute star. If you can't, don't worry, send the full resolution one in and I will do the heavy lifting. Please don't send more than one image in. Don't watermark them, and please don't put borders around them. But let me know where we can point people to in terms of sending folks to see your Vero, your Instagram, your website, and wherever else you're exhibiting your work online. Good luck and challenge set.
A familiar name, but not necessarily for everybody familiar work. When you think of Martin Parr, many people might think of, a certain beach scene in Liverpool, but not necessarily think of his black and white early works.
Like every photographer from that generation, that's where he started. As I say, we're talking about Brian Griffin, and they were at college together in Manchester in the late 60s. And they were all shooting black and white. I think they took matters into their own hand and set each other projects.
Oh, did they?
Yes, and then they'd have sort of panels together. These are the students to sort of to encourage each other, but also to sort of challenge each other. And so Martin was famously a very big advocate of Tony Ray Jones.
Yes.
So a lot of Martin's early work is he admits would be very influenced by Tony Ray Jones. And so really, I think until he did the Last Resort, that was a project in New Brighton of the beach work, which was colour. And from there onwards, that was it. He was a colour photographer and very well known for his colour photography.
So you've printed a lot of this bad weather project.
Yes, I've been printing Martin's black and white darkroom prints over gelatin prints for about 10 years or so now. And
how did he choose you to do that work?
Well, even though he knew me through Brian, or had met me through Brian, I think it was through a friend, Nick, who was working at Magnum.
Right.
And I don't know who he'd been using or what had happened, but they urgently needed someone to print some work, and got the job and been printing ever since.
The humour of Martin's work shines through. In this early work, you can see that Martin Parr-esque view of life, can't you? I'm looking at a particular photograph here of what looks like a summer's day event, but in the rain.
Yes, yeah. I think sort of a lot of people have the wrong idea about Martin.
In what way?
I think the whole problem with The Last Resort is that sort of he was criticised for being judgmental towards the working class, which was absolutely sort of not how the project was. The people in the photographs, they loved it.
Yeah,
they went to the opening of the exhibition. It was maybe sort of the critics back in London were the ones who were, and then there was a whole debate about him getting into Magnum and Henri Cartier-Bresson saying that he's from a different planet. But no, he got firmly accepted into, well, not firmly, he just got into Magnum, but he did so much good for Magnum. I think that's the other thing that people maybe don't realise so much about Martin Parr is that he's done so much good for photography in this country, to sort of setting his own foundation, which called the Martin Parr Foundation, but is not only for his work, it's actually sort of a collection and promoting British and Irish photography.
How much freedom are you given to print and express? Because as a printer, you can express a picture by the way that you expose it, by the way you dodge, burn,
With Martin's work, everything's pretty much set up as in how the work. Well, certainly the crop. That's usually his work is pretty much full frame. It's naturally, with most photographers, there may be a slight crop, and in that case, I will be supplied visuals, or either I'll be given a reference of his books to sort of check for the crop.
Yes.
So that's very important. If the work's been exhibited, and especially if it's been published, it's very important to make sure that the crop is exactly. Yeah. And often the books in themselves will give an indication of how the work can be printed, should be printed. But with reproduction, you'll find that, a book printed in the early 1980s may differ greatly from work that's printed, in contemporary books. So it's a balance of sort of hopefully knowing how the work should be printed.
Yeah.
I couldn't decide to sort of make it, say, a very contrasting graphic to how it's been printed before, because I might think it looks good. Because that's not what the photographer wants.
Yeah.
And I totally respect that. And in this situation, of course, I wouldn't. Martin's work, like a lot of photographers working within photojournalism, needs to be what we could say is straight. That doesn't mean to say that it's been worked in the darkroom. There'll be dodging, burning to control the tones, to control the sort of tonal balance. Which is obviously a different thing to the compositional balance of an image. But it will be trying to make sure the work looks direct and as an image, and very much trying to sort of make sure it's sympathetically printed to how it's known. Because, as I said, a lot of this work has been exhibited and published, so it's known.
Mike, I don't know why I've chosen to ask the last question of the show in your darkroom, if only to get a slightly different sound texture. But in that your life, in terms of printing, is spent in this particular part of your office, maybe it feels like a poetic end to the programme to ask the why question. What's your why in terms of what you do?
I should have known that question was coming.
Yeah.
I think my why in photography, and as I said earlier, it's all related. I work commercially as a printer, working for really interesting photographers, and that helps in some ways to pay, but also gives me the impetus to work on my own work. And then the passion and my interest in the projects I work for myself, I think that then feeds back into sort of putting that energy into working for clients' work. And I think the why is that I'm always learning. I'm always getting something out of this. It's not a financial thing I'm getting out of this, but I'm learning. I'm finding out new things. I get ideas for new work. I do this because I'm learning. And it's always been a constant, and it can be learning through clients, say like Brian, and you get so much from working for someone like that. Or it can be, say, we didn't talk about another project I've been doing is all about Rijeka, a city in Croatia. And
that just gives me an opportunity to come back, that.
and I've learned so much about, say, the history and through that. So yeah, I think photography is it's given me so much knowledge and so much chance to learn and see things and meet people.
Can I also say on behalf of Hannah Gimblett, who is a name that regular listeners will be familiar with, thank you for printing her work, because it's a story, Hannah's story is one of, she's had a lot of difficulty, a lot of trouble working, just physically working, and you've been helping her by printing her work, and I think that's incredibly generous of you, and I think that's something that the photographic industry and community, let's call it community, not industry, community, can be so very good at doing, assisting each other, helping each other. I think that's been pretty special of you.
It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to sort of to work with Hannah, and yeah, it's just community.
Yeah.
It's not coming from an industry side of things.
No, that's true.
And it sort of resonates with me, through personal connections. That it's good to sort of where possible, to help. I get a lot of requests for internships and work experience and shadowing, and before it was possible because there was a bigger set up and there were other people working with me, but it's very difficult for me to do that sort of thing now. I always get in touch with people, and if they're interested in seeing what I do, pop round for a cup of tea, but I can't do that. But in other ways, if something comes up which I know I can sort of do, it's applicable, and I'm very glad, and if I can be of any assistance in that situation.
It made a real difference to her, I know. I'm inviting myself back. You've inspired me to go out and make some film pictures, Mike.
You've got all that Delta 3200 to
Yeah,
use.
I have. I've got a fair few rolls, and I've seen what you can do with it.
Well, next time come back with a negative and we'll do some printing.
I was hoping you might say that. Can I just, for the sake of sound, I need to turn the red light on. I just pull this, don't I? My thanks to our friend Mike Crawford, sincerely. I really enjoyed my time quietly sitting with you in your dark room and looking through your work and other people's work. It was such a joy, it really was. And that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 100, yes, is waiting for you. The Extra Mile is part of our private Patreon channel supported by our wonderful community called Extra Milers. And each week there is an extra show which often features our community as stars of that show. And sometimes we also meet on the Friday Photo Walk show with our Extra Milers, as you have heard today. So this week, a little more of Mike discussing a personal project, and on the Extra Mile I'll be reading some of the letters that you've sent in to the show, the Extra Mile that is, of late. So we need a play-out song just to walk off some calories from those Garibaldis, or in my case, Mike's final chocolate hobnobs. After which, some show news about next week and a PS, a postscript for today. Right, music. A song to make some final frames to as we think about what's been said today. And I'm going to go for a dreamy one. I think this would be probably my darkroom, the sort of stuff I play in my darkroom. It would be my darkroom playlist, or it would certainly be on it. It's from Lewis Island, and the song is called A Little Longer.
Golden days drifting far away, light is leaving town, colors fade, but I'm thinking we stay just for a little while. Let's lose track of time, darling, stay for a little longer while I hold your time. We'll wait, so just rest your head upon my shoulder. Nothing in our way is colder, but the day's not over yet. Summer nights, watch them go by as we fight off the cold. Holding you tight, you know just what I'm thinking. I don't want this moment to go. No, I don't want this moment to go. Let's lose track of time, darling, stay for a little longer while I hold your time. We'll wait, so just rest your head upon my shoulder. Nothing in our way is colder, but the day's not over yet.
That's Lewis Island with a song called A Little Longer. Wonderful. And I do think that would be my sort of song that I'd be playing in the darkroom. I'd definitely have a darkroom playlist. Definitely. Right. Be sure to go to the show page today for pictures and links from and for and to Mike Crawford, and the people, the photographers that he's talked about today. Some show news. We're having our annual summer show break next week. A little time with the fam, as the cool kids with a Z say. But there's a big back catalogue, so dip back and have a listen to an episode or three, possibly one that you haven't heard. I know sometimes it takes a few weeks to catch up, so we'll take it as a catch-up week, shall we? But we need a little bit of family time, so we're having 1 week off the show. But keep those letters coming in, please. Send them to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. Now, in a couple of weeks' time, I have a very special walk to make with you, with two guests who have stories of their fathers and legacy. It's a particularly poignant episode in places. But yeah, that's coming in a couple of weeks' time, and I'm really looking forward to bringing you that. In the meantime, be sure to get your new assignment pictures in for the word energy. Thank you to Emily Renier for setting that one. Energy. Just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building this fantastic community that we've got here. Those who love to photograph and walk together. So, if you're about to become an extra miler, thank you. Sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, as they say. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, and Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, with Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members. Write a postscript for the show. Today it's from the Impressionist painter Edgar Degas, silent S. And though this is a quote that's, in the broadest sense, it's about painting, of course, but I think this one says so much about the work also of a master printer. I think this is applicable certainly to Mike, and certainly to us as we make our photographs. And it's this: art is not what you see, but what you make others see.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.